Oh, hello, and welcome back to Shockin' Y'all. I have a legend with me today. Let me please introduce Moses. Mo knows the body, and he somehow makes conditioning, rehab, and body mechanics artistic. He provides clarity around complex topics that allow his patients and students, I consider myself a student of Moses, space to piece it all together. He delivers hope for real healing. He is a mentor, athlete, and friend. He is one of my favorites because he believes in diversity of movement over the course of our time on earth. He is a gift to his industry and as kind and gracious as they come. Welcome, Moses.
Those are very, very kind words. I hope I can live up to that that amazing introduction.
No. I just like to send out a little love letter to my guests because I value your time, especially yours. I know you're super, super busy, and I'm just so excited to learn from you and introduce you to my whole community if they don't already know you. I don't know if it's appropriate to say, but it's my show. I sound like a sex worker, and I'm apologizing for that. It's a little nasal congestion, a little laryngitis. So I apologize. That's how we start things, Moses. Okay. Y'all, Moses is a wealth of knowledge, and a lot of folks probably listening to this know exactly who you are. But I want to just dive right in because our time is limited, and I know you are, as I mentioned, a wealth of information. I am someone who has suffered from chronic low back pain. When I met you at, was it Ken Stretch?
I feel like we knew each other online for like several years before we actually met IRL. So
For sure,
because
I was stalking you, and I was like, this guy is brilliant, and he just drops like little mini TED Talks / doctorates in every reel, and I was just in. I was so in. So meeting you in person was a dream. And getting back to my point, as a person who has suffered from chronic low back pain, I know you have a ton of experience and a kind of an interesting perspective on the spine in general, I think. As I mentioned in that intro, I feel like you make the spine, I don't want to use the word digestible, but understandable to the layperson. And I'm just curious how you approach your patients with chronic low back pain. Like, where do you start?
So it is a broad question because it's a really common thing. So statistically speaking, in America and pretty much every first world country, low back pain is the leading cause of physical disability. For a lot of countries, it's the leading cause of total disability. So sometimes anxiety takes it, sometimes depression takes it, but usually low back pain's in like the top three. So the reality is a lot of people have low back issues. What makes it complicated is that low back pain is multifactorial. So like if I have a broken femur, there's a pretty good chance we know why. Too much force, broke your femur, you need a cast, done. Like very, very simple. Back pain, there's so many different things that could cause back pain that it becomes just really, really complicated. So the first thing I'll usually try to tell people is it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all thing. And understand what all the variables are that can contribute to back pain, knowing that as a provider, as a professional, the only way to actually treat the pain directly is to surgically go in and just eliminate the nerves, which obviously we don't want to do. So we end up obviously not doing that in most cases. I'm a chiropractor, obviously I can't cut people open, but trying to educate people, we want to give the body clues that things are safe. So pain isn't a thing that the back sends to the brain. Pain is a signal that the brain sends to the back. And it sends that signal if it thinks things aren't safe. And potential reasons your brain might think things aren't safe might be a lack of flexibility, a lack of strength, a lack of awareness and motor control. Maybe the pain signals have just been firing too much and they've become hypersensitized. So even though there isn't actually anything wrong with the back itself, there's these neurological signals that are telling the brain to fire off those pain signals. So it's understanding, hey, like there's a lot going on. If you went to just a massage and that didn't work, or you went to just classic PT and that didn't work, that doesn't mean it's all in your head. That doesn't mean like you're doomed to need surgery. It just means we need to look at the bigger picture and there's variables that someone has missed.
I love that. And I love that you talked about pain. I don't want to misspeak, but how you said how it can overfire.
A lot of the pain stuff that I use. So there's an amazing TED Talk by a Australian pain researcher named Lorimer Moseley. It's worth checking out. And then there's a couple of pain science courses that I've taken as well. But Lorimer Moseley has this comment on pain that if you ask someone, what does a smoke alarm detect? It doesn't detect fire. It detects smoke. It sometimes detects heat. Once the alarm is triggered, it's going off.
Wow.
So think pain is the alarm. Sometimes the alarm goes off because there's actually a fire. Sometimes the alarm goes off just because you're cooking with a cast iron. And sometimes you have the alarm. So if you've ever rented an apartment where it's like you literally just like look at your stove and the tiniest bit of smoke fires off the fire alarm.
That's where I live right now.
That is most people's low back pain.
And it's my low back pain.
So it's understanding that, hey, sometimes there is a legit fire and we need to put out the legit fire. Sometimes we have a fire alarm that is way too sensitive and we need to find ways to recalibrate the fire alarm so that it is only sending signals when there's actually a legit fire, not I'm just cooking eggs for breakfast.
I mean, I'm both and. I have a sensitive fire alarm literally in my home, and I have a sensitive, given my ruptured and herniated and bulging and every other word you can use, disc history. So that's fascinating to me.
So something else is something that you mentioned that a lot of my patients will mention is, well, I've got the herniated disc, I've got the bulging, I've got the degeneration, I've got all these things. And we tend to demonize findings in the spine and not anywhere else. So if you were to X-ray or MRI a bunch of people who have zero symptoms, so their back feels perfect, has always felt perfect their entire life, okay? Of the 20 to 30-year-olds, okay? Like 15, 20% of them, you're going to find stuff on the MRI. You're going to find degeneration, you're going to find bulges, you're going to find shit, okay? By the time you get to like 60 or 70 years old, almost like 100% of people have stuff. That doesn't mean you're broken. That just means things change.
Right.
Okay? Now, I am over 40. I got some wrinkles on my face. We don't call that degenerative keratin disease of the face. Fucking wrinkles. I'm getting older. Okay. But with the spine, we have a tendency to look at pretty normal things as this big time problem. And then people get this idea in their head. It's like, oh, well, I've got the degenerative disc disease. Like my back's just going to hurt. Well, I've got degenerative face disease then. My face is fine.
Wait, time out. This is the best analogy I've ever heard. This is so real. This is so, thank you for that.
It's literally the exact same thing. It is connective tissue showing the changes related to life over time.
Oh my God.
Just one of them is on the inside and sometimes is very, very, very loosely correlated with pain. We think findings in the spine equals pain.
Wow.
Not necessarily.
Mic drop. That's it, you guys. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for being here. Oh my God.
Yeah. So I think a big part of getting people's backs to feel better is helping them understand what the heck's actually going on.
Yeah.
And not just, okay, you come in, I'm a chiropractor, I'm going to pop some bones. Hey, you're going to do 3 sets of 10 of these exercises for the rest of your life. I think really educating people into understanding what's going on makes it a lot easier for them to have some hope.
And that's what you're gifted at, though, Moses, because you're such an educator by nature. I mean, I don't know. I don't think you went to school to do that, but you might have. I just feel like you love imparting information and making sure that it lands for people so that their life journey on this planet is healthy and sustainable so that they can do the things they want to do, which is why I love the way you approach the industry.
There's 2 reasons for that. So one of those is I'm not actually that smart. I just need to come up with the simplest analogies ever for my brain to actually get it. I need to go really, really deep to come up with the simple analogy. And once I have the simple analogy, it's like, oh, I get it now. And I can explain it to others. Number 2 is early in my career, I had this situation where, so I was this exam doctor at this clinic. I was like 2 or 3 months out of graduation. And my job was just to do exams and show patients their exam findings. Sometimes I wasn't the doctor who did the exam, but I was the doctor who did the findings or vice versa. And so it's just, I show up and I see the list of what's on my schedule and I just deal with it. So I had this patient, he was the chief of neurosurgery at like the biggest hospital in the area. I am fresh out of school chiropractic graduate. So I'm like just shitting my pants of like, how am I going to explain chiropractic to this guy who's literally like this boss neurosurgeon, like fellowships, so like all John Hopkins and Harvards and all this. So I like nerd out on his research. I nerd out on his area of expertise. I go in, I'm explaining things in the fanciest ways possible. I'm talking about these ascending and descending pathways in the spinal cord. I'm just nerding out real hard. And I half an hour shit prepared. And after 2 minutes, he just stops me. He's like, son, med school was a long time ago. How about you just treat me like a regular patient? So that kind of rattled me a little bit, but I just kind of calmed down a little bit. I'm like, okay. So I started to simplify the explanation. And he's like, you're getting better. Now try to do it as if I didn't even finish high school. So I dumbed it down even more. And he's like, you're almost there. Talk to me like I'm 10 years old. So I literally just tried to find the most simple ways to explain things. And he's like, perfect. Do that forever with every patient for the rest of your life. And the fact that that was so early in my career, it just really resonated. And that really reminded me that it doesn't matter how much shit I know. It's can I actually communicate things effectively to the person who's sitting right in front of me, the person who's on my table.
God, that goes for every industry, doesn't it, though? Especially medicine, I feel like, because folks, and I grew up, my father's a retired head and neck surgeon, and I've watched people put doctors on pedestals, anyone in medicine, anyone in healthcare. And I feel like the one thing we should be allowed is an open, equal-footed conversation and how our body works and what we can do to maintain health long-term. I love this. I love that guy doing that for you. What a gift.
Right? Something that's really interesting about healthcare right now is for most of human history, health information was scarce. And it was the exclusive information of the medical profession. Then we got iPhones. And now everyone has every bit of information that has ever existed on the planet in their pocket that is a 30-second search away. So we almost overnight went from the patient knows almost nothing to now the patient has access to everything.
Yeah.
So our job has shifted from we are the ones with the information, we give it to you, to you are the one with the information, we are the one who helps you filter through it and separate the signal from the noise.
Yeah. The smoke from the fire and the heat.
That's right.
Unbelievable. And that's also the problem because just as I mentioned, I'm like, my bulging, herniated, ruptured discs, my severed talofibular ligament. Who cares? But what's your gait like? Can you stand up? Are you even footed? Is your pelvis a little crooked? Can you breathe? Which leads me to my real question. Because long time ago, I saw a video of you. I don't remember where. I don't remember much other than you broke down the diaphragm in such a fantabulous way. Can you just tell me if the diaphragm is important?
Yes. So to really simplify things, core stability, everything we've heard about core stability, everything we think of when we think of core stability, we tend to think of it in terms of strength. How strong are our muscles? How strong are our abs? How strong is our back? How long can we hold a plank? Core stability isn't driven by strength. It's driven by pressure. If you think of the tires on your car, the air pressure is what makes the tire stiff, not the rubber itself. Your abs, your obliques, your back, your pelvic floor, they are the tire. Your breathing strategy, so how your diaphragm chooses to contract, is whether you're putting air into the tire or not into the tire.
This is the inner abdominal pressure concept, right? Oh, yeah. I love it.
So if you think of blowing up a tire, when you add air to it, it expands.
Right.
The spine is attached to the chamber where the air is. So when you create intra-abdominal pressure, you decompress the spine.
Does everyone hear that? Do you need to rewind? Does everyone need to rewind and hear that one more time?
So give me 1 second here. So with every single back pain patient I have, I will show them this.
Okay.
This is a ball. This is a ball with air in it. This is my core stability model. It is stable because of air pressure. If I add pressure to the ball or air to the ball, it becomes stiffer. Okay.
Yeah.
Imagine these panels in the front are your ab muscles, back muscles, oblique muscles, pelvic floor muscles, diaphragm. Okay. And I usually try to set it up so the diaphragm, the one on the top, that is where the pressure gauge is. So the air basically, or how the diaphragm contracts, is what puts air into the ball. Okay. If I make this panel out of thicker, stronger leather, that independently doesn't do anything to change the pressure in the ball itself.
Okay.
You with me?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. So there is a breathing strategy that can do this. There is also a breathing strategy that does this.
Oh.
This is the fight or flight breathing strategy. When I use my neck and my shoulder muscles to breathe, instead of diaphragm going kind of downwards, it kind of goes out and forwards. So I compromise my low back pressure, my low back stability. Now, this is not a bad thing. By tensing up neck and shoulder muscles, I get them ready to protect myself or get the heck out of there, which is a good thing if I'm trying not to be killed. All right. If I tense up my neck muscles, that gets the air in a split second faster. Also a good thing if I'm trying not to die. The way I will tense my neck muscles is in a way that will actually shorten the target of my throat. Okay. Also a good thing if I'm trying not to die. The cost of those things is 2 or 3 minutes of low back stability. So would you sacrifice 2 or 3 minutes of low back stability to not die? Good trade-off. Okay. The problem is when 2 or 3 minutes becomes 2 or 3 years or decades.
Good God. If people can't see, he has like a deflated ball. So the ball is much more malleable. That's what he was showing.
Yeah. So the spine is attached to all of it. So when we blow up the ball, the spine actually decompresses. When we let air out of the ball, so when we breathe up here, we actually lose pressure in the system.
Yeah.
And then the discs that you talked about earlier, they live in these spaces. There is now more compressive force going through those discs when my breathing strategy isn't where we want it to be.
That's remarkable. And in my opinion, not spoken about enough, because the minute I bring up breathing to any of my clients, to anyone really, they're like, what does that mean? Like, I breathe to function. I think to myself, oh dear God. I'm like, have you ever tried a breath hold? And they're like, oh yeah, no, I can't go past 2 seconds. Like, yeah.
Well, the other variable, so the fight or flight response is the way we're supposed to do this.
Right.
But you live in a state where there's this thing we call vanity.
What?
And we've arbitrarily decided that sucking things in is sexy and pushing things out is not.
Right.
So let's say you've spent your entire life doing activities where you don't get the job unless you are sucking in a certain way for a few decades.
Yep.
And then my back might not be so happy.
Yeah. And maybe it started at 14 because you started sucking in your tummy at 9. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, God. So what would be the layperson's first step? Let's say just for a breathing exercise that could help you understand inner abdominal pressure, or at least help you identify maybe what your diaphragm does naturally through a healthy breathing pattern. Like
a really easy way to do this would be when you go to the bathroom, you're washing your hands, look at yourself in the mirror, take a deep breath in, look at what happens here. So what should happen in the front of your neck, what should happen at your collarbones is nothing.
I'm scared to try it.
So if you see elevation of the collarbones, if you see kind of exaggeration of like these neck muscles here.
Oh, wow.
That is a sign that these things are working overtime, which also tells us that the stuff down here is not.
Great, you guys. Everybody, listen. We're all going to do it. We're going to hold hands, kumbaya. We're going to get in front of a mirror and just try to breathe and see what happens.
So that's where we start. Then it would be just try to do less. If you're noticing there's a lot happening here, just try to find some way to do less of that.
Okay.
Without necessarily cueing anything, just think less stuff here, more stuff somewhere else.
Yeah. What about placing your hands like on your rib cage or on your belly? I know.
So that's the next part. So step 1, turn this off. Step 2, find out what to turn on. So when I teach my kin stretch classes, when I teach my breathwork classes, the way I will have people do it is I'll say, I'll have you find your belly button, move outwards 2 or 3 inches, push in. So like kind of sink in. On an inhale, try to expand into your fingers. So that would be at least making sure that things can expand forwards. Next would be go to the sides, go underneath where the ribs are, but above where the hip crease is, kind of sink in, try to push and inhale and expand sideways. Most people, the sideways is going to be way harder than the forwards.
Yeah. I most
Then
people,
it would be
turns out.
slide back another few inches. So now you're onto your back. So there should be a spot in there that's kind of easy to sink into. If you get too close to midline, you'll feel like more muscly stuff.
Yeah.
Get too high, you'll feel ribs. If you get down too low, you'll feel the ridge of the hip crease again. Same thing, trying to inhale, expand backwards. That one's usually by far the hardest for most people. Then I'll go back to the belly button, drop straight down to your pubic bone. So get like way, way, way down there. And inhale and kind of pressurize into like where your underwear would live. So once you found the forwards, the sideways, the backwards, the all the way down, trying to link those things together.
Can I take a detour for a second?
Please.
So I had a C-section and no one told me afterward, like, maybe you should massage the scar tissue. Maybe you should take, I avoided it like the plague because it felt weird and no one told me otherwise.
So here's what they did. So you had abs, you had pelvic floor, they gashed this, they took a baby out, they sewed it up, and they said, you're fine forever.
Correct.
Which I'm going to disagree with.
The audacity.
Right? So, like, in my personal opinion, every C-section should have several weeks of some type of pelvic floor, abdominal centered physical therapy. 100%. The average 12-year-old who rolls their ankle gets better rehab than a C-section. That's insane.
Again, a mic drop moment.
Insane to me.
Moses, it's crazy. And I'll never forget, I had Bo, and I think within, like, once I was cleared to go on walks, I just started like bleeding. And I went to the doctor and they're like, fine. I'm like, it looks like it's keloiding. She's like, it's fine. I was like, cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
On we go for another 2 years.
That should not be okay. I think a literal abdominal surgery should probably deserve a little more rehab than a 12-year-old spraining their ankle playing kickball.
It's disturbing.
You'd think.
You would think.
You would think.
My point, though, too, to that regard is this was a couple of years ago, it was during COVID times, I took a gua sha to my C-section scar and I started massaging it and just going all different directions. I had, for the next 2 or 3 days, the best breath I've ever experienced, and my back pain went away. Like, I would have off and on back pain. It would just be like a twinge here and there. I was mesmerized. I'm like, very clearly,
there's something here.
There's something going on. Yeah, it was remarkable. We have to form a movement. Maybe that's my next job, is I form a movement for C-section mothers.
So there's Jen Huss. She's a FRC therapist. She's a physical therapist. We talked like many, many years ago about like creating some type of like pelvic floor breathing course based on this type of thing. It kind of got put on ice, but yes, this needs to be done for sure.
I will be there. I will be your first student. Okay. I just have so many questions about that. And it's such a devastating thing to think about because my son is now 11. So that's cool. It's 11 years of scar tissue.
So something else that's great about the body is the cells are always turning over. And they're turning over based on what you tell them to do. And so I have a bunch of tissues that are organized in a certain direction. I cut them open. Okay. New cells are going to come in. They're going to start healing. Okay. But they are going to heal based on what you tell them to do. So if I don't tell that tissue to do anything, I don't stretch out the scar tissue, it's going to heal, but it's going to heal however the fuck it wants. Right. So that is scar tissue. It's a disorganized healing process. Right. Now, once that scar tissue has built up, it's not like it just stays exactly like that for the rest of your life. Those cells are still turning over, but it's going to be based on what you're asking them to do. So 2 or 3 days later, a few new cells are like, hey, I need to rebuild. How should I rebuild this time? Oh, nothing. Okay, I'll just rebuild the same way as last time. And just keeps doing that for 20 years. But let's say year 21, you realize, hey, I can guide this remodeling process. We start doing some things to the scar tissue. So a few days from now, the cells are like, hey, what should I do? How should I rebuild? Some of them start to rebuild like that. And then a few more, then a few more, and a few more, and a few more, and a few more. And then over time, we start to reorganize that scar tissue into a much more natural way.
I love that. That gives me hope. I didn't realize it was that frequently that the cells turned over like that. So every few days.
Well, if you think of your skin cells,
true.
How long does it take for those to turn over? Several times a day, right?
Yeah, I was going to say all the time.
So yeah, like you wash your face like every day, like
right.
if like so something that is very interesting for me is my dead skin cells are kind of dark. So when I wash my face, like no matter what I've been doing, like it's going to look very dirty because that's what dark skin cells look like.
Right.
And if I took a like wet washcloth to my face multiple times a day, like I'm going to see brown stuff on it every single time. So your skin cells are turning over like multiple times a day. Your muscle cells, if you were to do a hard workout, how long does it take for you to get sore? And then how long does it take for that soreness to go away? 2 or 3 days for most people, right? So some of the more muscular, deeper connective tissue cells, it's going to be a few days.
That makes sense. And that makes sense why when I was doing that gua sha, for like 2 or 3 days, it felt great. I was like, I'm healed. Everyone, I'm healed. I did one input. As we know, that's not how it works. One input, and I'm healed.
You do that over and over and over and over and over again.
Right.
We start to change the natural kind of resting position of some of that scar tissue-y stuff and start to send better signals back up to the brain. Brain's starting to say, hey, I know what's going on down there. Things are safe. I don't need to send off the fire alarm.
Now, I have another question. You mentioned briefly about the direction, like the direction of the cells being laid down. I know in FR, in functional release, they talk a lot about directionality, be really important about how the body can heal and recoup. So are you FR too? Are you all the FR?
I'm all of the things.
Moses is everything. Any system you've ever seen.
I'm FRS of Ultron, all of the parts.
But don't forget, he's not that smart. So, okay, just put a pin in that. Crazy.
I just spend a lot of money on things and like to hang out with friends.
And get smarter every single time. I love your humility. In terms of massage, and do you do massage? I guess you wouldn't really, but
so I don't do massage. I do FR. I do chiropractic adjustments here and there. The way I look at it is my primary job is to teach people how to do inputs on their own.
I like that.
So of the 168 hours that exist in the week, what you do for the 167 and a half hours that you aren't in my office is infinitely more valuable than whatever I do to you. I could be the best manual therapist on the planet and give you the best treatment that's ever existed. And if you are fucking it up the second you leave my office, it kind of doesn't matter.
Does it? And then they're going to leave you a bad Yelp review. And it's like, it's your fault.
Exactly. So if you're doing something on your own, even if it's not great, even if it's like only like 20% effective, that's better than zero.
Right.
And 20% effective multiple times a day starts to add up.
For sure. Why do we dismiss that?
I don't know. Couldn't tell you.
Humans.
Yeah. Right. So that's the way I try to educate people with things. It's like, hey, those cells are constantly turning over. Just keep reminding them what normal is over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
As often as you can remember.
Yeah. There's a couple videos of Moses online where he's deadlifting. What's that called when you have the round spine and you're deadlifting?
Jefferson curl.
The Jefferson curl. I would never. My heart stops when I watch it. But this is a testament to how strong Moses' spine is, how strong he is as a athlete and person, but also what the spine can do. I feel like you don't see this demonstrated often enough, and it's a beautiful thing. That's why my heart stops, because I know that the work that you've had to put in to create such a strong spine in order to do that is profound, but it's so cool to see.
Well, I know that like a lot of people, like when they see that, like their initial instinct is to freak out.
I know.
But like if you rewind the 7 years that it took me to get to that place.
Right.
So like when I took my first FRC course in 2015, I learned I had no fucking awareness of where my spine was. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I ran track in college. I ran in a straight line trying to keep my spine as stiff as possible. And then I turned left. Like that's what I did for like 6-7 years of my life. Okay. Then I decided I wanted a sport that'd be a little bit easier on my body. So I picked up cycling. So I then put my spine into a position that was totally fixed. And then I stayed there for 6 hours at a time. So I basically had like 15 years of never telling my spine to do fucking anything. So then I came to FRC and we started talking about spine segmentation, and my brain was just like, does not compute at all. So I spent literally years just trying to learn that I had a spine. So whether it's like segmental cat-cows or peeling things off the wall or off the ground, just learning that my spine was a thing. Yeah. After several years of doing that, I did my first Jefferson curl with literally a stick. And even that, because like in chiropractic school in my undergrad, like it was just drilled so hard about like stabilizing the spine and protecting the spine and not letting it move. So letting it move on purpose was terrifying.
Oh, for sure.
And so then I like threw a 5-pound plate over top of the stick and I practiced with that. And I threw a 10-pound plate and practiced with that. And I eventually worked up to the bar. And I eventually worked up to like the bar plus like around like 100 pounds or so. I remember the first time I did a 100-pound Jefferson curl. It's posted on my page or on my Instagram page. Terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. And that was like 5 years ago.
Oh my God.
So it was like, so like people see is like the 400-pound Jefferson curl, but they don't see the tiny incremental steps that it took me to get there. But understanding just the way tissues respond to load over time, I knew, okay, if I just keep plugging away, if I just make sure that I never bite off way more than I can chew at any given time, the body's going to adapt.
Yeah. Now, I just had a conversation with a friend of mine. She had a nerve block in her back, and she was telling me that her orthopedic was like, whatever you do, don't segment the spine. And I was like, oh my God. I thought that goes against everything I know. And I was like, did they explain why? And she said, no, just don't do it. And I thought, wow, there's a lot of mixed messages out there because I don't understand the value in that. Do you have anything to say? What do you think?
So my understanding, and that is just kind of a blanket statement. Right. This isn't necessarily an absolute statement, but my understanding is that as a general rule in the orthopedic world, their recommendations are going to be based on not screwing up the surgery they just did. And the best way to not screw up the surgery they just did is to do fucking nothing.
Unreal.
So their outcome measure isn't, does the spine function properly 3 years from now? Their outcome measure is, did the surgery fail? That's it. So if that patient comes back 6 weeks later and it's like, okay, you didn't reopen any of the scar tissue, you didn't break any of the stitches, my job is done.
Holy smokes.
So their lens is, don't fuck up the surgery I just did.
Yeah.
Best
I get
way to
it.
do that, don't do anything. So there's a fine line. So the surgeon is right. We don't want to fuck up the surgery. At the same time, we want to teach the body how to do the right things. Yeah. What is the balance there? That's where things become a lot more sensitive and a lot more case specific. Yeah,
case specific and complex because each person is coming in with a different history. Just as you mentioned in the beginning, like anxiety or actual acute injury, all of it plays a part.
Yep. So to steal a oversimplification from Greg Lehman, basically in coming out of a surgery, coming out of any injury, it's really just about balancing two variables, letting shit calm down and appropriately building shit back up.
Yeah.
That's it. Those are the variables. Okay. We tend to say you get the surgery, calm down is maxed out, and you just stay there for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever. And then once that time frame is done, then you start the build up process. The problem is if you go pure calm down for like 3 months, you're actually gradually getting weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker. So then when you start to build back up, you're starting from behind.
Oh, God.
So a different way to think about it would be day one, you're at 100% calm down, you're at 0 build up. Day 2, you're at 99% calm down, you're at 1% build up. And over the course of the recovery of the surgery, you're gradually kind of chilling out less and giving yourself the ability to do more. And eventually you get to a place where you can do all of the things and you don't need to hold back.
Oh my God,
Now,
I love it.
how long that takes depends. What the buildup looks like, it depends. What the resting looks like, it depends. But it's just about finding ways to tweak those two variables in a way that maximizes the ability to heal and the ability to rebuild.
It's beautiful. And that's a beautiful visual.
Is the way I look at it.
I love it. And I think everyone should go to you.
and that's kind of the way I communicate it.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time, someone will come to see me. They've seen all sorts of other people. They haven't been getting the results they want, and I will usually explain that, hey, when you went to this physical therapist, they did a lot of calming down, but they didn't really build you back up. So I've got a guy I'm seeing right now. He is a first responder. He's a firefighter. He's a strong dude. Like, obviously, like, he has the pack that's like a shit ton of weight. Right. He's benching like 315. Like, he's a strong dude. And like, his PT exercise is maxed out at like bird dogs and clamshells. So it's like, these exercises are not going to build you up enough to drag a 300-pound human out of a burning building.
Right.
Like, that's just not enough.
Clamshells won't help. Sorry. Just the visual.
So something that's really funny is like, so clamshells are kind of like the low-hanging fruit to insult in like the rehab community, because just like the default exercise that everyone gets. I had a patient about like 6 months ago. He was like 80 or 90 years old, or just like no mobility, and like the hip cars that I gave him was basically a clamshell. That was his brain's way of finding more proprioceptive awareness of his hip than he currently had.
Wow.
That's where we started.
Yeah.
So let it be known, Moses Bernard gave someone a clamshell.
And we're not mad, because it's a case-by-case basis.
Absolutely.
I love that.
Yeah, that was the only position he could get into where his brain could find his hip without pissing off his back. That's where we started.
Oh, wow.
We did not end there.
I'm sure you didn't. But
and he was 80. We still
80?
didn't end there.
He was 80?
Yeah, it was like 80.
Amazing, though. Good for him. I have my father. So my dad, as I mentioned, was sedentary most of his career. And then prior to that, he was in Vietnam. So the man is injured. He has what I call a Frankenstein shoulder. And then, what's it called? Plateau fracture. Or so basically, his kneecap came off, and then they just put it back on the opposing knee. So he's
That's
just,
fun.
Oh. And then the guy sat for 40 years doing surgery. But he would do cars here and there. And I would say, Dad, Moses says, closing angle anything. You don't move into closing angle anything. That's pain, structural, whatever. I'm like, you're not moving into it. He's like, I'm fine, I'm not. And his face was just grunting. I'm like, your face, sir, your face is telling me that you're full of lies. So for an 80-year-old to have a hip car that looks like a clamshell, I respect that. Because if that was it, that was it.
Exactly.
Yeah. You got to do what you got to do.
100%.
Okay. I'm shifting gears one more time.
No worries.
You created something called a tensegrity spine model. Is that correct?
Yes.
I need to hear all about it, because I love the word tensegrity, and you were the first person to ever say it, and I want to know more.
Okay. So I'm sure you've seen something like this before.
Yes.
So this is the spine. Okay.
Yes.
This is a model of the spine.
Right.
Okay? So this is, in the rehab world, in the research world, is what we call a functional spinal unit. Okay. So it is the bone, it is the disc, it is the bone. Okay. And so almost every study we've ever done on the spine is based on one of these. So to get to this, we need to dissect away the skin, the muscle, the connective tissue, everything, until this is all that's left. And then we put this in a force plate, and we see how much force can this handle before either the bone breaks or the disc bulges.
Ooh.
Okay. And then we say that much force is bad. Don't do that. Okay. So when people say heavy lifting is bad for your back, or running is hard on your back, anytime someone says doing high impact thing is hard on your joints, they're making that statement through this lens of the bones and the joints being what's weight bearing. Okay?
Got it.
The problem is everything in life is actually more force than what the lab tells us we should be able to handle. So technically, me leaning forwards like this, my low back should explode. Okay? If I were to take one of the bones out of the foot and bring it to the anatomy lab, I can break that bone with only a few dozen pounds of pressure. So you think like a chicken wing, it's not that hard to break into your hands. The bones in your foot aren't mechanically that different. But we also know the peak forces in running can be 3 to 5 times your body weight. Peak forces in jumping can be 10 to 15 times your body weight. So mathematically, every single time you step off of a curb, your foot should explode. Doesn't happen. So we know that the body can handle things that are outside of the realm of what the math tells us we should be able to handle.
Right.
So the biomechanics just don't add up. It doesn't make sense. So in like the 50s and the 60s, there were some medical researchers. They're like, what if all that stuff we dissected away is actually what's providing the stability? So what if it's not the bones and the joints? What if it's actually the muscles and the ligaments and the soft tissues that are doing it?
Yeah.
And they started to run some numbers with that, and they found it made perfect sense. So instead of it being the bones and the joints that are actually the weight-bearing parts, it's actually the muscles and the ligaments and the soft tissues that are the actual weight-bearing parts. So this is what we call a tensegrity model of that, okay? So this is a model of the hips and the pelvis, okay? And with this model, okay, the sticks, the bones, they are not touching. They're just floating there in space by the rubber bands. Okay. So when the rubber bands are balanced in the right way, there is no force actually going across the joints.
Wow.
So you're functionally degeneration proof forever if you can find a way to make sure these things are balanced enough. Doesn't have to be perfect, just enough. Okay, so I was introduced to this concept actually at my first FRC. Dr. Draspina had a good lecture on it. I grabbed him after the lecture and like really picked his brain about it. And he pointed me some different directions of some things that I could research. And as I looked into it, it's like, this is the only way the body actually makes sense. Okay, now here's where it gets really interesting. Okay. Now, with this model here, now imagine these rubber bands here are way tighter than they're supposed to be. So they're restricted.
Yeah.
And now this going on.
Ooh.
So now the bones are rubbing against each other.
Yep.
And that would be bad. Okay.
Yeah.
The spaces in between here, that's where the nerves live. That's where the discs live. That's where the meniscus lives. So you don't actually have abnormal forces going through your discs or your meniscus or your labrum or whatever cartilage when these things are balanced in the right way.
Right.
Now, things could be restricted. Things could be overstretched. So let's say I have a bunch of flexibility that I don't have ownership of.
Yep.
So basically issues with the active passive ratio for the FRA people, same type of situation.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's say I was a gym bro, every day is arm day. I only train these muscles. I've ignored these my entire life. Same problem. Okay. So what I communicate with patients is this might hurt if you've been doing it for a while. Massage might address one of those 4 problems. Strength training might address a different one of those problems.
Yep.
A chiropractic adjustment only affects the bones are kind of stuck together part of the problem.
Right.
If we don't actually assess which combination of things is going on, we're just kind of pissing into the wind. So we actually need to know which imbalances are contributing to things so that we can address it. So this model, this model I purchased like 5 or 6 years ago as a kit. Okay. So basically just sticks and rubber bands and instructions. And it was like, you have to put this together. Okay.
I love it. Yeah.
Then a few years later, there was someone who came out with a spine version, which was this guy. So this is the spine version of the same thing. You can see the sticks are not touching. Nope. They're just supported by the rubber bands. The discs would live in these spaces.
Got it.
This model I used to use pretty much every single day. It's starting to fall apart. I'm losing end caps and things like that. The people who make it, they don't make it anymore. And I felt like it was overpriced. So I was like, someone can do this better. Over the years, anytime I had a patient who had any type of like engineering background, I try to pick their brain to tell me, hey, like, what direction do I need to go? I'm a freaking chiropractor. I don't know anything about manufacturing or product creation or anything like that. So earlier last year, I had a patient who has a friend who's a hand surgeon who is also a 3D printing aficionado.
What?
So he pointed me the direction of 3D printing, learned some of that over the summer, learned some 3D modeling over the summer. So then we came up with this guy. So
oh my God, it's beautiful.
This is the tensegrity spine model I made. I use it every single day to show my patients that, hey, none of the bones are touching. They're just floating there in space. if I can make sure that each rubber band, each muscle is doing its job properly, when I bend and move and twist, I'm not getting forces through the joints themselves. So when everything helps, so this is how I also explain opening versus closing angle joint pain. So when I go to, so let's say I do a back bend, okay? So I'm face down, I go to do a back bend. If all of the vertebrae are helping out properly, I will feel a stretch somewhere on the front body.
Right.
Okay? If all the movement's happening from the low back, I will now feel compression in the back. So this is why segmentation is so important. So by learning to use these other pieces, that takes the stress off of that area that's compressing.
It's beautiful. I'm going to buy one right after we end this call. I'm just upset I didn't know about it sooner. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. Yep. You're a genius. I'm very proud of you for doing it.
I'm not a genius. I am just not very smart. So I need the simplest ways to explain things possible. I need fucking toys to be able to explain concepts.
Toys work.
So I made a toy to explain concepts.
Matt, my partner, Matt, he was obsessed with 3D printing.
Okay.
That's all he talked about. He was like, we're going to get a 3D printer. I'm like, are we though? Where is that going to live? Like, he was so on board with it. And I love that you went that route and it's gorgeous and it does everything it needs to do. I want to take that thing with me everywhere I go, because inevitably I'll teach a yoga class and I'll see someone doing an upward facing dog. And all I see is just absolute compression of their lumbar spine.
Sharp.
So just having that, if I could pull that thing out and be like, let me show you something real quick. The visuals, everything.
It really is. And
I love it.
It is made I remember when I got my first, so the wooden spine model, it just made explaining things so easy.
Yeah.
And so, I would just be explaining a concept to a patient, and I could see, the eyes glazing over, and I just hand it to them, and it would just be, instant light bulbs, I get it now.
Good for you.
So I like to make sure people know what the heck's going on.
And you can get it on Amazon.
You can get it on Amazon if you just search tensegrity. So the words is tension meets integrity, spine. It'll be the only thing that'll pop up.
I did not realize those two words. Okay. Very, very good.
Makes sense now, right?
It did. Yeah. Everything's coming together, Moses. I knew it would. All I needed was an hour of your time. I'm good, you guys. I'm now a doctor as well.
Exactly. Done.
Okay, listen, we're going to wrap this up, but I didn't tell you this part either, but I do this little rapid fire game at the end where I just like to hear a little bit where I give you a word and then you just give me your answer, and it could be one word or it could be a phrase or it could be a whole diatribe. You want to play?
Okay. All right.
It's very easy.
Okay.
Okay. I love you so much. Okay, you ready?
I'm ready.
Happy.
Birthday.
I just had a birthday.
I know.
I like that. Okay. Healthy.
Wealthy and wise.
My next two words are wealthy and wise, Moses.
No fucking way.
Great. Wealthy. Are we best friends?
Apparently. Okay, so now that you've thrown a curveball for me, so I'm going to say being healthy throughout your lifetime is true wealth.
Say it louder. Say it loud. Bo and I just had this conversation over breakfast.
Being able to do the things that you want to do with your body over your entire lifetime is a type of wealth that money can't buy.
Oh my God. Box it up, put a bow on it. That's the truth. Okay. Wise. Next word, wise.
So I'm going to look at wisdom at the ability to change your mind when the information changes.
Did everybody hear that?
So being able to take core beliefs that you've held true and have new information debunk it and be able to change your mind without feeling some kind of way about the information changing. Non-judgmentally being able to do that.
Huge.
Wisdom.
Huge. And my final word, free.
I have just been, the last couple of days, I've been nerding out on some travel blogs, and some people have relocated from one country to another country. So as a Canadian, my views on what freedom are very different from what the average American's views of freedom are. So when I think freedom, it is an all-encompassing thing. And it is something that doesn't impact only you. It is something that impacts others.
Wow.
So one person's freedom can't infringe on someone else's.
Wow. Are the last 4 minutes of this my favorite part? This is why you're the best.
That's why we're friends.
It's why we're friends. I'm so thankful to be your friend, and I'm so thankful for your mind. And I mean that, like, it's a gift. You're a real gift.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I'm very excited for you and your podcast project, and very excited to see what direction it goes.
I am too. And I thank you so much. And listen, Mo is everywhere. Listen, can you tell folks, if they're listening, where they can find you and what your handles are and stuff?
So most active on Instagram. So that would be at MosesBernard, all one word.com. My website is the same thing. It's my name, MosesBernard.com. Got some online courses on breathing, spine stability, cars, mobility, that you can find all of those through my website as well. So just be the MosesBernard.com, just find the link that's to courses. My product on Amazon, my tensegrity spine model, is not under MosesBernard.com, but again, it's named what it is. Just find tensegrity spine model is the name of the product. So if you're interested with that, that's where to find it. Otherwise, I'm pretty easy to find. Shoot me a DM, ask me questions. I'm usually pretty good at replying, as long as it's not an essay. I'll point you the right directions. If it's something that is a training related question, I'll let you know. If it's a more wellness, healthcare related question, I'll not answer you, because I don't want to practice medicine without a license over social media. If you're interested in local Kinstretch things, I do teach a class Saturday mornings here in the greater Tampa Bay area. If you are interested in online Kinstretch things, there's a bajillion people who have amazing products that you can track down. I'm easily accessible.
You sure are. And he's very generous with his time. So I encourage you to reach out if you have questions. And when I looked up tensegrity spine model on Amazon, it was like the first 2 things that popped up. I found it right away. So FYI, there he is. Okay, Moses, you're the best. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.